Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here. This is always a fantastic event. Thank you to FIU and the Digital Era team for hosting this. Definitely a great opportunity to learn here in Miami and share and meet people. So students, anyone here, take advantage of this and make sure you're doing your networking and updating your LinkedIn with everything you're learning today. I'd like to say a quick word. Chief, thank you for the introduction. Lawrence Embil, manager at Cybersecurity for Miami-Dade County. Melissa, please.
Hi, Melissa Bishoping. I am head of threat research and intelligence at Tanium, based in DC. So very happy to escape our very cool spring and come down here to Miami.
Christopher.
Hi, I'm Chris Nieves, solutions engineer at Netrix. I've been doing it for about 10 years. Looking forward to chatting about how we're moving from detect and respond to preemptive security.
And Jeremy.
Hey, thanks, Lawrence. Good morning, everyone. Jeremy Rogers. I am a CTO for Government Health and Education for ARMIS, down here from Tallahassee, Florida, where I used to be the Chief Information Security Officer for the state. I'll say for FIU, you've got a great tech team here at FIU, but the university president was also the chair of the Cybersecurity Executive Committee for the state. So you're in a good spot here.
We have a great president here, so yeah, we're very lucky. Melissa, I'll start with you. Every vendor today claims to be proactive. What actually separates a preemptive security program from one that just is detect and respond?
The advances that we've seen in the last 18 to 24 months really have made detection faster than ever, but fast detection is still just detection. A breach has already occurred when that happens. When I'm speaking with organizations and we're talking about what does it mean to be preemptive and proactive, we're talking about how are you taking what you can see in your environment, your true visibility, as close to real time as possible. What are we seeing threat actors do in the wild? That's the intel component. And then how are we using that to get ahead of the adversary? What doors are you closing before the adversary gets into your network? And I think that when you take an intelligence-informed approach, coupled with a climate in your organization that says you are empowered to go make a change on this production system, even if it's business critical, even if it's something that normally would require downtime, you're saying, hey, this is that important to us. We need to close the door. We know these attacks are in the wild. We know they're getting faster. We know AI is changing how fast attackers operate. That's when you start talking about a preemptive program and preemptive products, not just detecting within minutes or seconds.
Sure. Chris, you guys deal a lot with data security, data discovery. How would you approach this?
Yeah, I think Melissa was spot on. If you're waiting for an alert to happen about an incident, that incident already happened. So what are you doing before that incident happened to mitigate what an attacker could do, right? That's the question. What could happen, and how do we prevent that from happening? Whereas, in the past, we'd be waiting and alerting, and all right, that happened, now let's go put out a fire somewhere, right? We have a lot of tools and a lot of ways to understand the risk that your organization already has. So if you can get ahead of that, why wouldn't you? What excessive access do you have in your organization? Why does user A have access to sensitive data? Do they need it? Can you get rid of it? So if you're not doing things like that, you are just waiting to react to an incident instead of preventing that incident from happening.
Jeremy, your take, please.
Yeah, Lawrence, maybe we'll knock out that question and I'll pull in what I would say there. But my mom used to say it's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Absolutely. And that's kind of what this panel's about. So if you don't know where your data's at and who's accessing it, if you're not patching and remediating your endpoints at the speed of AI now, if you don't know what your assets are, if you don't know what you have and what those vulnerabilities are, then you're going to pay the price. And it's tough work to get ahead of that. So it's great to track things like your mean time to detect and respond, but if you don't do the, I'll say, boring work of knowing what you have, making sure your end-of-life systems are not end-of-life, patching, knowing what your critical systems are and patching them, you're going to pay, right? I think everyone's heard of Claude, Glasswire, right? That's a big thing. There's plenty of other companies out there doing that stuff, but we don't have time. No, we don't have time. And if you're still worrying about the 0 days from a month ago or a year ago or 3 years ago, then you have no chance in today's environment.
Yeah, you can't manage what you can't measure. So if you don't have your inventory of your data, your hardware, and your footprint, it's going to be impossible.
Yeah, I used to joke with the state agencies, if you don't have your network map and your assets, Go ask China for it, because if you don't have it, they do. And they'll probably sell it to you, so.
Jeremy, I'll stay with you on this one. Attack surface management, vulnerability prioritization, identity exposure, big tenets of cybersecurity today. It's crowded. How does your organization help with managing these different pillars of cybersecurity?
Yeah, great question. So at the state level, we're a big distributed organization, but we have this same problem whether you go to the agency or the high level of like knowing what you have. So when I took the role, first thing I did is bring in all our security leaders from kind of different mini orgs and say, who's comfortable with what's on your network? And one hand went up. And the CIO at the time, Jamie Grant, and I, we looked at each other, it's like, okay, the one guy, we're more worried about him than everyone who realizes they have a problem. We know this guy doesn't know what he has. So what we do, we bring to the table is knowing what you have, knowing what the vulnerabilities are against that. And when I say what you have, it's not just like your endpoints, but from the ground to the cloud, everything's connected now. You have stuff in the cloud, you have all these IoT assets, and all of those things, you heard in some of the previous conversations, they can not only be a spot to grab intel, but they become launch points. So basic NIST CSF, know what you have, know what's vulnerable against it, and then get after it. And as the CISO, my team didn't patch things, but they track the patching. Now we have infrastructure teams to patch and endpoint teams to patch and cloud teams to patch. So you need to make sure that's done, but if you're not doing that at the security level, if someone's not responsible for that and taking ownership for it, then it doesn't happen to the level we need it to.
Christopher, I'll throw this one to you, but does anyone here have a really simple environment to manage? I didn't think so. So visibility across complex environments. Most teams have more visibility than ever, especially across OT, that's operational technology like SCADA systems. IoT, think of the building management system in most buildings. Cloud and identity. But a lot of times those teams have so much visibility, they feel blind. Where's the line between that visibility that drives action and visibility that just fills dashboards?
Ooh, that's a good question. The quote I like to think of is, I can't see the forest because there's so many trees.
Exactly.
Right? And we see this constantly. Organization will have a SIM, they'll have 15 different tools pumping data into that SIM, and they still can't answer the question, who touched this file last Tuesday? Right? And the line between useful visibility and just another cluttered dashboard is data anchored in identity. So if you can't tie a signal back to a user or a particular person, what their role is and whether or not that behavior you're witnessing is abnormal, you're kind of just generating reports. You're not actually doing any kind of risk reduction, right? So data needs to be anchored in identity. It's as simple as that. Especially in the world of AI, if you have 6 different people using an account for something and something happens, well, now you got to go first figure out who those 6 people are that have access to that account, and then who of those 6 people did it. And this turns something that you could have answered in seconds into something that might take hours to figure out. And if we're talking 0 day, let's talk about 0 minute, right? If an account gets compromised, say it's a domain admin account, it can only take a matter of seconds before a script is run and persistence you'll never really be able to get out of your environment is established. So you need to anchor your data in identity.
Cool, thank you. AI is now in almost every product, every security platform. Where are you seeing it deliver real disruption value in daily operations, and where's the industry over-promising? Where can we push back on our vendors?
I've spent a lot of time with this problem set, both as a practitioner and then as someone who works on product, and looking at how various organizations of different sizes and maturity are leaning into what tools. And I started to see this fork of some organizations are building really great chatbots. Other organizations are taking a look at what AI is, in my opinion, the best at for our use case, and that is looking at statistical outliers, building those correlations and trends faster than your human team is capable of. Even at the junior level, what might have used to take an hour or 2 or more for a junior analyst to build a Python script to parse a new data set into something interesting is seconds. right? That is where these tools are going to shine for our workflows in the early days. We're starting to see really interesting results in baselining endpoint behavior, baselining network behavior. If you've heard me talk before, I always talk about how our job in security is to look for the dumb, the different, or the dangerous, right? We're looking for those things that deviate because eventually an adversary is going to look dumb, different, or dangerous to a trained eye. The AI isn't replacing the eye, it is letting the eye scan deeper data sets, wider data sets faster. What I don't think we need more of is, when you build an AI tool set that is built on kind of incomplete data sets, you open the door for hallucinations, you open the door for kind of inconsistent inferences. Rock solid data underneath the AI lets it draw clear conclusions, lets it give you clear and precise metrics that become actionable. So I think that's where I see, that's the difference maker in good AI implementation and less ideal AI implementation. Robust data being used for that outlier analysis and sort of statistical analysis that humans are just historically slow at.
Yeah, controlling it, if it was a RAG model, that you're feeding it exactly your policies, exactly your team's playbooks, exactly your procedures.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that I've seen is there was a couple of months ago, maybe January or so, I kept seeing on Twitter and on LinkedIn, people kind of wanted to build this all-in-one SOC prompt, like your SOC analyst in a single Claude prompt. That's the wrong approach. These tools do better when we give them very precise tasks and very precise guardrails and say, like, let me have a team of agents and an orchestrator that goes and does each independent task. Don't try and make them perfect at being your dream unicorn hire in one 300-line prompt. It's not going to work.
Chris, from the services side, when you walk into an organization that wants to move from reactive to preemptive, what are the first 2 or 3 things that you have to change before the tooling really matters?
Well, the first thing I look for isn't really even tooling.
Good.
The first thing I would do is ask 3 basic, what I would consider foundational questions. And that is, do you know every privileged account in your environment? Do you know where your sensitive data is? And can you tell me every unauthorized change that happened in the last 24 hours? If you can't answer those 3 questions, no amount of tooling is really going to help you. Those are the foundations of data security. And if you can't answer those 3 simple questions with a clean answer, you could have all the tools in the world, but if you don't know where the things you need to protect are, if you don't know who can access those things you're trying to protect are, and if you can't monitor and detect and actually prevent those unauthorized changes from happening, you're not really going to get anywhere. The tooling isn't going to save you. I'll give you an example, kind of alluding back to what I was talking about before. We walked into a healthcare organization. They had gotten an alert fired off on some abnormal domain admin behavior, and it took them like 4 hours to figure out that there was actually 6 people who were using that account. That dramatically increases the amount of time it takes to figure out who did it. Right? Whereas if it was just that one person, and you could go to Bob and say, hey, Bob, what happened with this domain admin account? We detected some abnormal activity. Well, maybe Bob would say, that wasn't me. At which point, whoa, someone has compromised this domain admin account. We need to reset the password, disable that account, start looking at what else that DA account's been doing. But when you have multiple identities in the mix there, now your question and your response time is dramatically, what are you going to do at that point?
It's like a Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. A lot of fingerprints.
it's like, oh, I think I might have, well, I was doing something with an app and I thought it needed DA or whatever, right? And now you got 5 people you got to ask questions and hope they're all honest, right? So,
Jeremy, I'm looking out here and I see at least 4 to 5 different public sector agencies, including some folks from mine. What's your point of view with your experience as CISO of State of Florida previously?
Yeah, from a public sector standpoint, I want to do a quick poll. Who here is on either like the edu or gov side? You have or should have a .gov or .edu. So first of all, when the previous panel, when they said, do you have unlimited resources and people?
Yeah.
Your answer is not no, but like bleep no, right? So it just doesn't. So I would say from a few things. One, when having been on the government side of the house and now being on the vendor side, is treat those vendors as part of your team, and they work for you. I think government's not good, and this is something I always dissuade. Don't try and build or reproduce you're going to have a hard time with your staff and your funding stacking up to any of the product teams that just put in whoever has millions for their development budget. That's a tough thing to mount. And even if you can do it, then you got to maintain it and you got to document it, and then that becomes your own attack surface. So work with vendors, but more importantly, make them work for you. Like, they come with a team of folks that can augment you, and they could augment your team, and not just what their product does, but have them be a core part of your team. When I were in the state SOC, I would have people from Lawrence Embil, people from Tanium there. We didn't get to data yet, but we needed to. Those would be a key part of our core team. Use them as part of it and let them extend your team.
Awesome, thank you. Great advice. I'll open this one up to all of you. How are the strongest programs translating exposure data into language the business actually responds to? Say revenue, mission, regulatory exposure, brand. How does that bubble up to the CEO or CIO or whoever's the lead, that C-suite?
So I'll start with this one. Some of my best advice that I give to people, especially if they're early in their career or they're moving into their first management role, is that ultimately the board of directors does not care about getting patch compliance to 99%. That does not show up on a chart they give a darn about, okay? Your job as an effective leader in this space, because everyone sitting in this room knows how important that is. We got to get our patch hygiene up. That's not news to anyone here. What's going to make you compelling is when you look at your organization's top 3 to 5 objectives for the fiscal year, and you figure out how to weave a storytelling that says, well, we have to get to patching because it ties to this thing that the CEO or the president or whoever your supreme decision maker is has said is most important to them. Brief anecdote is, early in my career, I was working for an organization that was heavy in industrial manufacturing. We had an aging system that was over a decade old that was doing all of our camera recording. It was a pain in the butt. I hated having to deal with it. It was slow, the hardware was dying, and I was on the hook for maintaining it. But if I go to my leadership and say, hey, I need a hardware budget for the camera equipment, they don't care. It's not on fire today. Don't fix it if it ain't broke. However, the CEO that year had said one of his top 3 objectives was, I want to reduce OSHA violations and improve safety outcomes. Well, if we lose visibility to the plant floor and there's an accident, we've opened ourselves up to liability, we've reduced the ability to deploy emergency services to the field, and I was able to tell that narrative and get that approval. It had nothing to do, in his eyes, with, oh, the equipment's outdated and it's causing more burden for my teams. It had everything to do with, I made it matter to the business. So you have to become an expert at translating that. I think that's the most important way to accelerate forward.
Yeah, business impact analysis.
Bingo.
So, I'll take, yeah.
It's open tall.
No worries. Yeah, identity and data risk translate directly to regulatory exposure, which is the language that these boards and these GCs actually speak. So tying a risk or a breach directly to how that will affect your bottom line is definitely a big step to do that. And the way that I present it, or I see it being presented successfully, is let's stop presenting dwell time and CVSS scores, and let's start showing clear paths to your business having that reputation risk because of a data breach, right? So if I could show you, here are 5 paths today to your sensitive data from people that don't need access to that sensitive data, and here is how I can solve that, that's a lot different of a conversation you're going to have with leadership, right? Rather than, here's a report, bunch of red stuff, it's bad, we need to fix it. You need to show that concrete evidence. You need to show exactly what those red charts are actually leading to. So if you can map out an attack path and say, this user is a front desk worker, and because they are in this group, which is circularly nested in this other group, that can reset the password of this other group, that will lead to my sensitive data ending up in the news, right? So having that concrete evidence is what you need, and you need to be able to tie it to a concrete monetary expense.
Lawrence, I'll just add to what Melissa and Chris said here. So as the CISO for Florida, especially for anyone who's in government, if you had an incident that met a certain threshold, that has to be reported. If you're any entity in the state of Florida and you lose Florida residence data, that is another reportable to yet a separate spot. And there's a lot of money that goes with then informing those. So taking it, I worked my way up through programming and engineering and architecture, and it wasn't until I was kind of in the CISO role that I realized what that took. So as you move up in your career, and so take Miami-Dade, like, I'll tell you what your organization doesn't want to do. They don't want to have to call the governor's office or downtown and say, we've had a security breach and it's going to cost $4 million to notify everyone in our county that this happened, and it's going to be on the news, and our services are also disrupted for a month. So you got to kind of take that worst case scenario of, they don't care about patch life cycles and assets. You know, you're at like that. They don't speak that language. They speak political risk, monetary risk, and how it's there. And if you don't understand the core business of your organization, whether it's government, education, health, industry, you're never going to be able to connect that line. So I like to say the Amish have never been hacked. If you don't have a backup plan for your core businesses, then, and you don't know what those core businesses are, then you're already missing things. Start with the business and work your way out.
Oh, thank you. Here's another one open to all of you. If mean time to detection and mean time to response aren't enough, what metrics are you using to show risk reduction over a time in a disruption-focused program?
So when I look at the intelligence-informed programs, because I do think you have to be intelligence-informed today, the reason I say that is we all have 50,000 vulnerabilities that are going to show up on a vulnerability scan on any given day. All 50,000 of those don't actually matter to you. And that might sound like a hot take to some leaders, but quite frankly, on a given day, I care about maybe 100 specific vulnerabilities. And the reason is I care about what's public facing to my org. I care about the threat actors targeting my sector. I care about the TTPs that they use, and I care about the vulnerabilities tied to that. That whittles that list down to where I'm going to laser focus my visibility on either remediating that, like ideally, right, I'm going to patch it or I'm going to close that workflow. But if I can't, because we all know sometimes there are extenuating circumstances and vulnerabilities have to, quote unquote, persist. It's a whole nother talk. What can we do to enhance our observability there? What additional layers of monitoring and detection can we put in place, and what other tripwires can we lay to catch an adversary attempting to exploit that, because we know that's probably the door they're going to come in. I think that in 2026, at the pace that these things move, if you are not looking at your program from a sense of, I'm going to take the data about what these threat actors are doing, what my industry partners understand, and I'm going to contextualize it within my environment, you should shoot to reduce your team's focus to those laser sharp 100 vulnerabilities, 100 issues or so that really warrant the value of their attention, because everything else is noise. If you generate an intelligence report that doesn't actually drive a decision in your architecture and your infrastructure, what you have generated is not threat intelligence, it is threat entertainment for your reading enjoyment.
Yeah, you're really going beyond the known exploitable vulnerabilities to add a whole other layer of intelligence.
Yeah, go through your KEVs, go through then the actual reports of which actors are targeting and what they're doing. Like you really can refine that list down to something that's human manageable.
Yeah, know your adversary.
Yeah.
Chris?
Two metrics I look for primarily are going to be standing privilege reduction and sensitive data exposure. So on the standing privilege reduction end, how many local admins do you guys have? How many do you need, right? We all have those people in the organization, particularly developers, who insist that they need to be a local admin on their machine in order to do their job. And that's just not true anymore. It isn't. You need a PAM solution. You need a solution that can actually reduce that persistent access. And if you can allow them to do their job, maybe they just have to run admin PowerShell or whatever it is. They don't need to be a full-time local admin on that box, right? That account gets compromised, and now they're running Bloodhound, Mimikatz, and going through your network, right? And then the other side is that sensitive data exposure, right? So where's my sensitive data? Is it where it's supposed to be? Who has access to it? Who needs that access to it? And of those people that need that access, do they always need that access? So if you can show quarter over quarter, I have less privileged accounts in my organization, and if you could show, all right, I have less sensitive data exposure compared to last month or last quarter, those are two metrics that really show that, all right, we're actually going in the right direction. Those are two lagging indicators that if you're not improving those two things, you're not really doing any preemptive security. You're just doing the, what do you call it?
Threat entertainment.
Threat entertainment, yeah.
Yeah, I like your perspective of bringing the time-bound privileged access into whatever those admins actually need. Yeah.
Exactly. People use laps, that's pretty good. But really, there isn't any good use case for someone to be a domain admin full-time anymore. Even if you're rotating that domain admin password on a schedule, right? Someone has to request it, they get the password, all right, then it gets changed after. Okay, but what happens if that domain admin hash gets compromised? Password doesn't really matter anymore, right? So you don't need standing domain admins. You don't need standing local admins. There are tools which can enable you to have just-in-time admin access to those accounts. This isn't 20 years ago. We don't need that all the time. And particularly on the domain admin side, I like to ask for forgiveness rather than permission when I'm stripping that away.
Here's another one. I'll start with you. Over the next 12 to 24 months, what's the biggest blocker to organizations actually operationalizing this shift? The tooling, talent, governance, culture, what do you see? What's your crystal ball tell you?
Yeah, Lauren, good question. I would say the number one and number two blockers are probably universal in that it's often politics or bureaucracy in some aspect and probably money in the other one. And if you're not good at kind of telling some of these stories, then you're going to struggle with both of them. I'll say if you go into the vendor room next door and you could find one person who at these tables that doesn't say they deal with AI in some way, shape, or form, I'll be happy to buy you a beer at the reception. I think they may be free, but either way, I'm happy to get you one. So that the landscape is changing at a more dynamic pace than we've ever seen. So if you take those kind of two things of bureaucracy and not enough money while our end users and our business are trying to embrace that dynamic change, it begs the question, is AI the answer or is it a growing attack surface? And I think most of us would probably say yes to both of those.
Right. Chris, your take?
From my perspective, it's governance. Tooling exists. Talent is a hard but solvable problem. And culture will shift with wins if you could show results, right? So the real blocker comes from this siloed approach to security. Nobody owns the problem from end to end, right? We'll have endpoint security, we'll have data security, and we'll have identity security, all with different teams. Those teams will have different budgets, they'll have different metrics, but we're all trying to solve the same problem, right? So if you can get someone to own that end-to-end problem and create a program which addresses the risk at each of those layers, then you'll find the budget, you'll align the metrics, and you'll be much more close to solving that problem. When someone in the organization owns the full exposure path, they can actually see all of the different places you're breaking down. And if there is a gap in any one of those places, your investments in the other two really lose value, right? If you have a super strong perimeter strategy, but you have an insider threat, well, now you still have the same problem, right? Or any other way. So you need to consolidate that organizational plan and have an end-to-end security process for that.
Melissa, how can a cyber threat intelligence program help break through the silos that Chris was just talking about?
So we have the capabilities, we have the technologies, we have the intel feeds, we have probably more intel feeds than we're actually getting value from as an industry, right? What we need is a climate that empowers decisions to be made on that intelligence, that empowers that intelligence to become actionable. And I think both of you have kind of touched on that. Like, it is a little bit of a political problem, but a lot of you sitting in this room are leaders, and you're going to go to your teams and say, we need to move faster, we need to adopt AI, we need to adopt a defensive posture. Are you also going to your leadership peers and your executives and your presidents and saying, I need air cover, I need to go have a hard conversation with finance or with student services about taking this system offline, about upgrading. Like there is some politics to be had here, but for you to make a difference, for you to actually close these loops, you take the intelligence, you take the tools, you take the people, and you create a climate where all of that can be put to work and drive outcomes. I cannot stress it enough. We don't need to report on how many indicators we detected or did not detect this quarter. We need to report on how our intelligence drove an operational decision that measurably improved our maturity.
The politics side is probably one of the hardest non-technical aspects of
We haven't solved that with AI
yet. Managing your career at that political level, you might be a fantastic technologist, but sometimes that's a very hard ceiling to break through.
Yeah, and the attacker doesn't respect org charts, by the way.
No.
So.
Or your timelines, or your schedules, or
your change
Government
windows.
boundaries.
Your change windows
don't
are just
care.
opportunity
The law.
windows.
yeah. Really quick down the line, 30 seconds. Like I said, I'm proud to be here at FIU. I know there's a lot of students and early career people. Melissa, what would be your key takeaway for them?
Stay curious, stay building, stay breaking. I took a very non-traditional path into this industry, and my best advice to people who are either trying to make a pivot or who are acting as a career changer or exploring this space is don't sand off the things that are unique about your perspective and experience that you bring to this industry to try and fit in and fit some specific mold. Bring your unique point of view. Bring your unique experiences from prior roles, even if they weren't in tech. I started as a receptionist and a makeup artist. Wow. So bring that to what you do and make yourself stand out and stay curious.
I would say understand identity deeply. It's one of the most relevant things in every organization and every industry. If you can understand how an identity is accessed, how it is abused, and how to detect it, you're going to be relevant in, like I said, every organization, every industry for the next decade probably.
Lawrence, I'll say from a career perspective, I've held roles Chief of Cybersecurity for DoD and the IC, Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Florida, Deputy Mayor for the city of Boca Raton, and now I'm CTO of Government and Education for Armis, a company that was acquired for $7.75 billion just a week ago. Honestly, I was not qualified for any of those roles fully when I took them. Don't be afraid to take a chance. If you meet 110% of a resume of a posting, you're probably looking at the wrong job. And leverage your network. Lawrence, we've met at several of these, so there's a lot of good security leaders and technology leaders in the room. Make the most of them.
I'll cheat and tag on to that for a second. Sir Richard Branson has a quote that I kind of apply to a lot of my professional growth, and it's, if someone offers you an amazing opportunity and you're not sure if you can actually do it, say yes and figure it out later.
Yeah.
Because that's how the best career advancements for me have happened.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Secure Miami. Thank you, panelists.